Alright folks, continuing the less is more videos here, we are going to paint a word bearer in a very simple and very quick and easy to replicate style. Once again, thank you to Games Workshop for sending me these Chaos Raptors from Kill Team. We're going to start off priming the miniature black with a little bit of Typhus Corrosion underneath for texture, in case you're thinking about the added texture in this miniature. On top of the black primer, we're going to go with a metallic contrast scheme here today. I'm going to be using Heavy Metal by Army Painter with a sponge from the top all over this miniature. Again, these videos are not aimed at winning any competitions or Golden Demon. They are simple and effective and ready for your table. This one took me half an hour. Very easy to replicate and looks pretty decent by the end of it. Using a damp makeup sponge, I apply this to the entire sort of surface of the miniature, making sure that the recesses stay nice and dark with the black primer. With that first metal added to the miniature, things are still pretty dark at this point, so we're going to take it up a notch with Runefang Steel by Citadel, which is a very bright silver. This time in favor of the dry brush instead of the sponge. I just want to catch all the raised areas on this miniature and give it even more contrast than it has already. You can be pretty heavy-handed with this dry brush. This is just to push the contrast even further, ready to apply our speed paints later on. The difference with the dry brush here is it gives a little bit more control than you would get by using the sponge. I've had a surprising amount of requests for word bearers in this series, so thank you for being patient and waiting for this one. Just to reiterate, I'm doing a very simple scheme here. I'm not going to add too much detail to this. I'm not going to go over any of the trim either. We're going to leave things nice and basic. Okay, with our heavy contrasting metal base coat done over black now, we can start getting the speed paints out. And in this case, we're going to be using Blood Moon Red from the John Blanche Army Painter set. This is almost like a contrast or speed paint version of Blood for the Blood God. This is such a lovely, beautiful, bloody red color, and it works great over metallics, I find. This is quite a translucent one, so you may need to do 2 coats as opposed to 1, depending on how dark you want this miniature to be. After that one first coat is dry, I feel like this miniature still isn't quite dark enough or rich enough in that red yet, so I'm going to add another coat straight out of the pot here of the Blood Moon Red, just to get a really rich bloody red for our word bearer. With that red now dry and looking very rich and warm and bloody, we're then going to block out the left shoulder pad with some Corvus Black now. While the Corvus Black dries, we're then going to hit up the head with some Ungor flesh. With chaos heads like this, I kind of want my paint to be a little bit blotchy, and you can control how blotchy that is. Of course, I could go over this in many layers, but I quite like the variation in just how blotchy this is. And if you can control it, it looks pretty good when you put washes over it too. For some of the gold details on this miniature, on the Eye of Horus on the gun here, and any other details that we want to do in a slightly different metal, I'm using Emperor Gold now. Over the gunmetal, I then use a wash of Grimdark Shadow straight out of the bottle. This is a nice warm alternative to, say, an Agrax Earthshade. And I lay this down over any of the metallic areas that aren't red. Back to the head now, we're going to use some warm skin shade over the top of that blotchy layer of Ungor flesh. May as well put a decal on that shoulder pad now, as I do have word bearers represented on the transfer kit that comes with these miniatures for Kill Team. Micro Set and Micro Soul are used here. Both of these are fantastic products that are essential for transfers, and I've picked a nice flaming skull of a demon to put on this shoulder pad. The reason why I blocked it out in black is because we do have black on word bearers generally, particularly on the shoulder pads, and it makes things pop nicely once this nice transfer is on top. Using Micro Set, I put things in place, and then once that's dry, several layers of Micro Soul over the top will stretch this transfer into place nicely and remove any shiny bits that we don't want. With the gunmetal not looking quite dark enough, I pull out my favourite Citadel contrast paint in Rattling Grime just to darken things down even further on any of the gunmetal areas. Sycorax Bronze, a Citadel layer paint here, a very bright bronzy sort of brass colour here is used as a spot highlight in places. I want to make sure that I keep everything very grimdark and gloomy on this one, so I'm only using this very sparingly on some of the rivets, spikes and any sort of details that really stand out in an effort to sort of break up the block colour on this miniature. Once that final little highlight is done, we're moving on to an enamel wash, this time with Goon's Grime to muddy up and make everything look filthy while unifying the entire miniature. When applying this, I use a sort of dabbing motion with a dirty, old, quite large brush. I don't want to absolutely flood the miniature, but we are going to remove most of this with some cotton buds and odorless mineral spirits. After the Goon's Grime has been sat there for about 10 to 15 minutes, we're then going to go over with a cotton bud dipped in some odorless mineral spirits and just remove any of the surface grime and detritus that's left on this miniature, making sure that the Goon's Grime is firmly in the recesses to give it that weathered look. Once that's dry overnight, the next morning I then hit the entire miniature with a matte Winsor & Newton varnish and then do the base with some orange pigments. Easy peasy. This one took me about half an hour, not including any waiting times, and the results are pretty decent. It's similar to the Night Lords video that I did, however, I'm probably more happy with the Night Lord generally. Again, I didn't add any washes to the Night Lord, whereas I did with this enamel wash here, so it is a slightly different vibe, but very, very similar if you put the two together. What I do prefer about the Night Lord, though, generally speaking, is just the color choice I think is a bit nicer. That blue really does stand out nicely against the orange base. In this case, the orange base doesn't work as well because the miniature is already a warm red color. So you could pick a slightly colder looking base, perhaps a snowy base, or even a gray or concrete or something like that, perhaps even green as well. But bases are a big thing when it comes to a miniature. Even if you like your paint job, it's always good to have quite a contrasting base or something that doesn't take away from the actual colors that you're using in your paint job. Anyway, this was a very quick one and I hope you enjoyed it. Again, these aren't aimed at winning any competitions, but they are grimdark, effective and very easy to achieve. So this should give you a little bit of hope. If you're struggling with ideas for word bearers, this would be a good one. Of course, I didn't go over the top. I could add more trim details in silver and black perhaps, but honestly, I think this works pretty well and it's effective enough for the tabletop. You could do an entire squad or an army in an evening or a couple of days here. So anyway, please do like, share, subscribe, and I'll be back with another one real soon. Thanks for watching.